Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Hanford, and my wife, Danae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. Before we get started, let's hear from one of our sponsors.
Attention established business owners, entrepreneurs, and coaches. Do you want to make a big impact and big money? Become known as the expert authority in your field and attract more of the right clients. This is J.V. Crum III, host of the Conscious Millionaire podcast, and I want to share with you the 9 proven steps I've personally used to produce over 1,500 episodes and attract 12 million listeners. Download the podcast roadmap with the 9 proven steps to podcasting success. Get it right now by going to consciousmillionaire.com/start podcasting. Again, go to consciousmillionaire.com/start podcasting.
Welcome to the Tough Decisions podcast. Today on our show, we are interviewing Ryan Haley. Ryan served in the military, and he currently works in ministry and entrepreneurship. He's also the host of a podcast called A Better Way. Ryan, thank you for being on with us. We are looking forward to talking with you today.
Thanks. It's great to be on the show. Kind of funny being on the other side of this. I'm usually doing what you guys do.
I know whenever we're on other podcasts doing interviews from that side of the table, it's a little bit different scenario. But, Ryan, can you walk us through what you're currently doing right now as an entrepreneur and what your current focus is?
Yeah, absolutely. First focus is, like I said, the podcast, The Better Way, where I interview Christian business owners and entrepreneurs about how they have prospered and been given guidance by God supernaturally. And the second main focus right now is real estate investing.
Awesome. Well, I want you to walk us through a tough decision that you have had to make along this journey of becoming an entrepreneur or being an entrepreneur right now.
Sure. So as Danae said, I was in the military. I was a U.S. Navy officer for about 11 years. And my last assignment was in the Pentagon. And by this point, I was a senior lieutenant, 03. And so I was making pretty good money, making 6 figures, had a good, position, salary, all the, benefits of a nice cushy job. But I hated what I was doing. I mean, it was good experience and it was good perspective. And I know it grew me a lot as a person, but I got to the point where I realized I did not want to continue on the traditional quote unquote golden career track that wasn't bringing me the deepest level of fulfillment, meaning, and purpose in my life. So after getting financially prepared, wisely stewarding my money over time and really following what I felt was in my heart, and through prayer and meditation and discussion with other people, doing what I felt God led me to do, I decided to get out of the Navy in 2014 and jump into being a full-time realtor, where you don't have any benefits, any salary, any structure, really. It was kind of the complete opposite end of the spectrum from where I had been working in the Pentagon and as a naval officer, having that whole ecosystem supporting me my entire adult working life. So that was a pretty big jump at the time, but I think through a lot of preparation financially, as well as, spiritually, emotionally, and just doing a lot of work and reflection on what I really wanted to do with my life. It was actually, didn't even feel like a tough decision at the time, because I was so ready to get out of where I was and step into what was next. So from the surface level, it looks like a tough decision, but from where I was emotionally, I actually couldn't wait to get out of where I was and jump into it. But I realize now that had I not been prepared, like I said, both financially as well as spiritually and emotionally for it, it probably would have been a pretty big smack in the face. And it still was, but it's one of those things that I don't look back or regret that ever at any point. So I think because of the preparation process I went through for several years beforehand, it made what should have been a tough decision extremely easy, if that makes sense.
Sure. So can you pull out some lessons that you learned through that process and that tough decision?
I think the first lesson was really that what we typically look at as signs of a quote unquote great job or career, high pay, good benefits, time off, big, important position, title, and standing in society. For me, wearing a military uniform and having a big, important sounding position at the Pentagon and all these other things I'd done really didn't actually cut the mustard for me in my day-to-day life, because I believe we're all designed for purpose and fulfillment and meaning in our work specifically, as well as the rest of our life. And so I was just feeling that more and more building. And so I realized a lot of people who are quote unquote successful in their career throughout life, especially men towards the end of their lives, will typically tell you, I really wish that I had spent more time with my family and, developing myself than just chasing after money and success, because at the end of their life, they realize it's pretty hollow. So I think I was able to get that perspective at a pretty young age and experience level, so that I didn't have to look back and regret a lifetime of building an empire and wealth and success that ended up being kind of empty at the end of the day.
And how long did it take you to complete that decision? Maybe not complete the decision, but to fulfill the decision? Because it sounds to me like you kind of knew a couple of years before you actually stepped away from that position, you were putting things into place for a couple of years. So how many years would you say you took to actually fulfill that particular decision that you had made?
Right. So I'd say the total transition timeline was probably about 2 years. I'd gotten my orders to the Pentagon at the beginning of 2012. And I took those orders specifically because I'd seen the writing on the wall that I probably wasn't going to stay in the Navy. I didn't have any specific guidance at that point, but I took a set of orders that would, in my mind, have some real world applicability, because I'd done a lot of things that were more operationally related. And so I had an MBA through the Navy, and I wanted something that was going to set me up for kind of a stepping stone to transition out of the service directly into a trajectory that would make sense going to the civilian world. So I took the set of orders at the Pentagon in late 2011, realizing that was probably going to be my last military assignment. But in my mind at the time, I thought I would be stepping into a defense contracting job or something like that, which it very well could have. And then once I got into the job, realized in early 2012, mid 2012, that it wasn't something I really wanted to be doing. It wasn't what I wanted my life to be about. Then I would say it was 2013, about a year before I got out, where I really felt called by the Lord to step out of the military, put in my resignation paperwork, and be ready to separate within the next year. So once I had a defined sense of, okay, God's calling me out of this, I had some mentorship that, kind of confirmed that for me. And so I'd say it was about a year from the time I made the decision in March of 2013 to put in my paperwork that I then separated the following February in 2014. So a little under a year from when I definitively made the decision.
Ryan, talk a little bit about why you chose real estate. Is that something that you were always interested in? Had you been kind of an entrepreneur at heart for a while and that was the best way? Why did you choose the real estate?
Yeah, honestly, that's a great question. I had not really, the answer pretty much to all your questions is no. I had not thought about that, but I had been talking with some people about some different possibilities while I was still in the Navy in that last assignment that all seemed to have some kind of a real estate bent to them for other things we were working on as a church group and some kind of visioning and ideas. And so then I started reading about what it would actually look like to get my license. And I read a book by a guy named Brian Buffini, who's a real estate coach. And he talked about how you can use this as a way to integrate all of your different natural proclivities and inclinations and desires to make this work. You can basically make your business work any way you want to. And I really fell in the idea and loved with the idea of being able to kind of, we talk about lifestyle design now. I think Tim Ferriss popularized that term. I hadn't heard that at the time, but I liked the idea of being able to integrate my passions, my hobbies, my interests, my existing social network into an effective way to build a business and to, generate clients and deals and pursue this. And I was also interested in real estate to some degree, but to be honest, I've never been like the guy who went and looked at houses, watched HGTV, any of that kind of stuff. So it was kind of a random thing that I felt, despite myself, kind of a convergence of these different things coming together that led me to that decision. And so I realized when I got into real estate that I love the entrepreneurial aspect of it. I love the people aspect of it, and even some of the analysis, because I am still very left-brained in some ways. But after being in it for about a year and a half, I realized that real estate itself, being a realtor at least, was not my ultimate passion. There was other elements of the business I liked, but not the real estate specific portion. So I decided after about a year and a half that was not going to be the ultimate thing, but I had learned a lot of valuable lessons along the way.
So since you talked about the real estate a little bit here, I want you to kind of share with us maybe a tough decision that you had in the real estate business. Have you had any tough decisions that you could share with us in the real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. So as any realtor out there knows, when you're first brand new in the business and you don't have a lot of context, and you're self-sourcing all your leads, not working on a team where they're just fed to you, which is what I was doing, any lead is really exciting. And I think the typical realtor mistake is to bend over backwards because we get so excited about the possibility of working with a client that could lead to a deal that we kind of allow our own boundaries to be transgressed, if you will. And so one particular example was after about, I would say, 6 months or so, maybe a little less, I'd already done one deal with a really great set of clients, an amazing, great deal that worked out well for everyone. But then I had a listing coming, a potential listing that could have been huge. And it was the people I lived in the house with at the time. And that's kind of a whole story in itself. But that was like a very good opportunity. And so I was getting excited about the possibility of being able to have this listing. At the same time, there was a buyer who was looking to both sell his existing property and buy another place. So this is what we call a twofer in the real estate business. You get a client who's both buying and selling, and you're going to be able to get both of those separate deals. And so it's very attractive, especially as a young realtor, to want to jump on those kinds of opportunities and be able to build your business as fast as possible. But this particular client was extremely difficult to work with. He wanted to sell his house for way too much money. He wanted to buy the house on the other end of the deal for a ridiculously low amount. And he was also extremely rude, and he thought he knew everything, and he was demanding. And he'd already been through about 3 or 4 other realtors. So I already knew coming into this that this guy was going to be a challenge. And it was looking like I might be able to work with him. But it finally got to the point where I just realized this could be the kind of thing where I, try to make all these things work and make this all fit together. And that I would be spending so much time and effort and energy on this one client with both deals that looked very improbable to go through, while at the same time taking, there's opportunity costs to our time and effort and, emotional and mental bandwidth. And so after a lot of discussion with people, mentors in the business and just, again, thought and prayer and meditation, I made the decision to let that client go because I wanted to focus all my good energy on the listing the other possibility. So I ended up letting him go with the possibility of those 2 separate transactions. And I was able to focus all my energy on a listing that ended up selling in 6 days for $825,000, my first listing. And it was a great deal, an amazing, feather in my cap, so to speak, as a up and coming realtor, but it was also very difficult in its own right. So in retrospect, I think had I tried to hold on to all 3 of those deals, I think possibly all 3 would have slipped through my fingers and I would have been left with nothing. So I decided to let the 2 deals go with that one client and focus just all on the one deal. And that, I think, ended up bearing a lot of fruit.
And how has that shaped your decisions of how you move forward with real estate, in the future?
Well, I think beyond just real estate, in life in general, I'm realizing that sometimes you have to say no to some seemingly good things so that you can say yes to the best things or sometimes even the one thing. And so it's sometimes really difficult, I think, as entrepreneurs and people who are, have a lot of vision and, see all these possibilities. It can be really difficult because we know that there's all these good things that are, possibilities, to say no and close the door definitively on some things so that we can focus all of our time, effort, and energy on 1 or 2 or however many things that are what we have identified as the best thing, and to just have confidence in that decision and not second guess yourself.
And I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, we get caught up in the quantity of things and not the quality of it. And that's a great point.
Right.
Sometimes you have to say no to certain things to reduce the quantity so that you can continue to provide the quality so that you can continue in the future to actually get more quantity, if that makes any sense. You have to be able to, spread that out as best you can so that your quality of work doesn't go down as well. Can you share with us, Ryan,
Absolutely.
something that you like to do when you're facing a really tough decision?
A couple of things that I like to do in any tough decision, whether it's entrepreneurial or anything in life. I really believe that in abundance of counselors, there's safety. So meaning get as many perspectives, have as many conversations with people that you trust as you possibly can. So I'll talk to people that are mentors in the field that I'm dealing with, or just in general. I think that there's especially for me as a very external verbal processor, having a lot of conversations out loud with other people, getting their perspectives is really, really important. And then also as a believer myself, I really prioritize prayer and time in the Word, and spending that time letting the Holy Spirit show me things that I could not possibly get in my own natural logic and thinking. And so, that relationship with Jesus that I have and the Holy Spirit is a really valuable part of it. And he also will lead me into practical things like, how to think about a certain problem or decision, how to, which people to consult. And sometimes just as importantly, which people not to consult, because sometimes there's people that they have good intentions and they think they have your best interest in mind, but sometimes you'll share an idea with them, which is still very embryonic, very, kind of in that place where it could get trampled on. And I think that sometimes I'll get discernment as to who I should not share certain things with, because they're not going to hear it and they're not going to be able to understand where I'm coming from on that. And I don't need a voice of doubt in my head. And at the same time, like I said, you don't want to get into groupthink or only seeking people out who are going to agree with you. So there's that balance of discernment in how to talk to people that are going to have a different perspective, maybe tell you what you're thinking is a bad idea and tell you something you don't want to hear, which is really valuable. And then on the other hand, not to talk to people who, the Bible talks about casting your pearls before swine and they trample it underfoot. So I think that's where the Holy Spirit and that prayer and time in the Word comes in, because there are certain people that you need to hear something that you don't want to hear. And there's other people who you need to just not share that because they're not going to understand it and they could crush, your vision or your inspiration for something you should move forward in.
Well, Ryan, it's really good to hear you talk about that balance, because I do really believe that that's something that sometimes is missing. We either tend to not talk to the people that we know are going to disagree with us and search out only the people that we know are going to confirm what we want. Or, we're constantly hearing and giving our ideas to people that are all they're ever going to do is see the negative. So it does have to be a balance there. And I personally had never really thought about just even being directed as to who to ask. But I think you're onto something for sure there, because, giving your ideas to the wrong people can be very discouraging, but it can also be a dangerous place to just run ahead and not consult anyone.
Absolutely.
An important step as well. What do you recommend to our listeners as a book that has maybe helped shape the way you make decisions or the way that you run your business, a book or a resource that they could read or look into?
Sure, absolutely. So obviously, as I mentioned before, one of the things I put the most emphasis on is the Word of God. So I know that may seem like a kind of irrelevant or kind of
the Bible has
a lame answer.
About business for sure, and decision making.
It does.
It's interesting you bring that
Absolutely.
up, Ryan, because I sometimes, and Danae can vouch for this, I'll sometimes be sitting in a church services and I'll lean over to her and I go, everything that he's saying could be applied to business. Like the concepts
right.
and the ideas and everything that they're talking about, take out, the pastor trying to, talk and direct it towards, the congregation. He could actually take the audience and put in a business entrepreneur audience and gear that entire talk for business owners too.
Absolutely. And I'm actually involved with several groups who do just that. In fact, I'm actually looking at becoming a coach with one of them. So there's a wealth of wisdom and practical advice, as well as, sometimes people think it's all ethereal, spiritual things, and you can make it that. But what I like to focus on is, like I talked about in my podcast, where the supernatural meets the practical. So bringing that spiritual element into the very real practical day-to-day decisions as an entrepreneur, investor, and just human being on the planet, which I think there's, even as an unbeliever, there's people who see that this is an invaluable treasure trove of wisdom. But I feel like I should give you guys also another secular book as well that's really introduced a lot of illumination to me. And so Beyond the Bible, which I would say is the number one, because it deals with everything like we talked about. Another book that I'd highly recommend that really changed my life in a lot of ways was StrengthsFinder 2.0. And if you're not familiar with that book, what it really talks about is focusing the vast majority, in fact, of your effort and time and energy on your natural strengths and giftings, as opposed to trying to shore up your weaknesses and become better at things you're not naturally good at. And that's not to say there's not a place for personal development and, overcoming weaknesses and personal constraints. It's really important to be aware of them. But what that really inspired me to do was that, I can have a lot more return on investment, if you will, for my time, effort, and energy, focusing on building those things I am naturally wired and created to do and to be excellent and even best in the world at, and that bring me the most joy and fulfillment. And then work with other people who are strong in the areas that I'm weak, and so that they can shore up that weakness, and then I can be, that strength where they're weak. And so I think, the idea of focusing on your strengths primarily, and then collaborating with other like-minded people to be able to shore up your weaknesses is something that has given me so much hope and encouragement. Is a huge part of my philosophy and how I engage with life. And that can go back to the other decision we talked about with what to say no to. I can say these are all good things, but I know that the one thing for me, because of my gifting and skill set and interests and passions, is this. And therefore, it makes it easier for me to say no to these other great opportunities.
So let's shift gears here a little bit, Ryan, and talk about some things that you have done with the money that you've made right now or up to this point as an entrepreneur. Have you traveled to any exciting places or purchased any extravagant items or anything like that with the money that you've made up to this point in your life? And if so, can you share some of those with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Traveled all over the world. I love traveling. I traveled a little bit with the military, but ironically, I've probably been to about 25 countries or so, and I'd say only maybe a handful of them are actually from the military. So places, I've been to China, Vietnam, Thailand, pretty much all of Western Europe, Hawaii, all those kinds of things. And I think, people always ask me what my favorite is. It's hard to say. It's such a loaded question. It really depends on what you're looking for. But I think for me, my priority is more, I'm a pretty simple person. I'm kind of a minimalist by nature. So I value experiences and times and relationships with people over material things. Not that I'm necessarily shunning material things, but I drive a 10-year-old Honda Accord. I live in a pretty small place that works just well for me. And eventually, as I keep building my real estate and other things, I know that those things will increase as well. But for me, the emphasis is really more on vacations, experiences, and having the freedom of time to spend with people that I really love and care about, and who we can fire each other up and get connected. And Israel is definitely on the bucket list. I haven't been there yet. I've been talking about it, so I'm making that a priority to make a trip to Israel, hopefully in the near future. But yes, absolutely, extensive travel and awesome experiences all over the world is kind of where my heart is.
Well, Ryan, we have some listeners that listen in to our podcast from Israel, one of the 29 countries that are now listening to our podcast. And so hopefully you can maybe, meet some of those people while you are there in Israel. And it sounds to me like you're kind of living the millionaire next door lifestyle, which a lot of entrepreneurs do. They're usually very humble people and they don't usually try to, show off too much.
Right. Yeah. I'm certainly not a millionaire yet, but I believe I'm on the way. And yeah, I do believe that's how I'm living right now. And as I continue to do that, I think that I'll have the ability to continue to add exponentially to increasing what I have. But I think just keeping a priority of what's truly important, what's going to bring you lasting satisfaction. And again, for me as a believer, that eternal significance is definitely, how I try to live my life.
Absolutely. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule to be with us on the podcast today. How can the listeners reach out to you if they want to follow you a little bit more or get some more information about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, A Better Way is the podcast that I have, and you can find that on iTunes. It's called A Better Way. And I swear I checked this before I set up the podcast, but turns out there's a lot of podcasts named A Better Way. So if you put in A Better Way, Ryan Haley, if you're searching in iTunes, then that's the way you can find it. And then the website is www.abetterwaypodcast.com.
And we will also, Ryan, just to help the listeners out, in the show notes, we'll put a direct link to the iTunes podcast so that you can go to the toughdecisions.net website, search for Ryan Haley's podcast, and in the show notes there will be a direct link so you're listening to the right one with the right Ryan Haley.
That's great. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, again, thank you so much for your time. Look forward to learning more from you as we continue to follow you on your podcast. And we just thank you so much for being here on with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.